only the sensation of his hands, his mouth, and the overwhelming certainty that I had crossed a line I could never step back from. I wasn't the florist anymore. And he wasn't just the customer. We were partners in the wreckage, bound by a red dress and a white handkerchief soaking in wine. The car slowed as we approached the garage, but neither of us moved away. Nicholas rested his forehead against mine, his breathing ragged. "They will come for us now," he said, his voice low and serious. "Kenta won't let that insult stand. The war has officially started." I ran my thumb over his lower lip, swollen from our kiss. "Let them come. We burned their warehouse. We humiliated them at the ball. We're winning." Nicholas let out a dark, rough chuckle. I like the sound of that. "Get used to it," I said. "I'm not going back to the daisies, Nicholas. I think I prefer the thorns." He kissed my palm, his eyes promising a storm that would shake the city to its foundations. "Good," he said, "because from now on, you're not leaving my side." The car stopped, the doors unlocked, but as we walked to the elevator, hand in hand, I knew the safest place in Chicago wasn't the penthouse. It was standing right next to the monster who had just declared war for me. And God help anyone who tried to take his flower. The elevator doors slid open, delivering us back into the sanctuary of the penthouse. But the air inside felt wrong. It wasn't the temperature, not yet, but the weight of the atmosphere. The silence I had grown used to over the last few days had changed. It wasn't the peaceful silence of insulation. It was the dead, heavy silence of a machine that had stopped breathing. Nicholas stepped out first, his hand still gripping mine. He was still vibrating with the energy of the confrontation at the ballroom, his eyes scanning the living room as if he expected Kenta Yamaguchi to be sitting on his Italian leather sofa. "Something's off," Nicholas muttered, releasing my hand to reach for the light panel on the wall. He tapped the sensor. Nothing happened. "Power surge?" I asked, stepping into the room. The red silk of my dress rustled loudly in the quiet. Or did the storm knock out a transformer? "This building has 3 backup generators," Nicholas said, his voice tight. "The grid could go down for the entire eastern seaboard, and my lights should still work." He tapped the panel again. "System status," he commanded. The ambient voice of the penthouse AI, usually a smooth, feminine alto, remained silent. Then, a sound cut through the room. A mechanical whirring, grinding, and high-pitched. It was coming from the wall of floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. "Get back," Nicholas ordered, pushing me behind him. We watched in horror as the heavy, bulletproof glass panels began to slide open. Not just one, but all of them. The automated motors groaned against the locks, forcing them disengaged. The wind didn't wait for an invitation. It slammed into the apartment with the force of a physical blow. Chicago in January is not merely cold. It is a weapon. The temperature outside was 5 degrees below zero, with a wind chill that could freeze skin in minutes. The gale roared into the living room, scattering papers from the desk, toppling a vase, and instantly sucking the heat out of the space. "The system!" Nicholas shouted over the wind, grabbing his phone. "They've hacked the automation." He was tapping furiously on his screen, but I could see the red "access denied" flashing even from where I stood. "They're locking us out," he yelled. "They've overridden the climate control and the security seals." The cold was instantaneous. It bit through the thin silk of my dress like needles. I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering violently. "Can't you close them manually?" "The manual overrides are in the server room," Nicholas shouted, moving toward the hallway. "Stay here. Huddle near the fireplace." "The fireplace is gas," I yelled back, my teeth already chattering. "If they control the system, they cut the gas too." He cursed, a harsh sound lost in the howling wind, and ran toward the back of the apartment. I stood there, paralyzed for a second. The wind was whipping my hair across my face, stinging my eyes. Snowflakes were beginning to swirl into the living room, settling on the expensive rugs. It was surreal. One minute we were the kings of the city. The next we were standing in a glorified icebox. Then I heard a sound that terrified me more than the wind. A deep, resonant groaning coming from the right, from the winter garden. I ran toward the glass atrium. The door to the garden was propped open by the wind pressure. Inside, the tropical plants were thrashing in the draft. But the sound wasn't the wind. It was the pipes. The complex, high-pressure irrigation system that kept the humidity at 90% for the ficus and ferns. I saw the copper pipes along the ceiling vibrating. Water expands when it freezes, I whispered to myself. If those pipes froze, they wouldn't just crack. They were pressurized. They would explode. And the main water line for the penthouse ran directly through the floor of the atrium, right above the server room where Nicholas was heading. If that line burst, thousands of gallons of water would flood the server room. It would destroy the manual overrides. It would destroy the security mainframe. We wouldn't just be cold. We would be defenseless, locked in a dead building with no cameras and no comms. I didn't think. I didn't wait for Nicholas. I reacted with the instinct of a florist who had spent 10 years battling Illinois winters to save her livelihood. I ran into the atrium. The temperature in there was plummeting, the shock to the tropical plants immediate. I ignored them. I scanned the wall for the main intake valve. It was up high, near the ceiling, hidden behind a trellis of jasmine. I grabbed the heavy stepladder Nicholas had left in the corner from days ago. I dragged it over, my heels slipping on the wet tiles. Condensation was already turning to ice. I climbed the ladder, the wind buffeting the glass walls around me. My hands were numb. I reached for the red wheel of the emergency shutoff valve. It wouldn't budge. It was rusted tight, or maybe the cold had already seized the metal. I gripped it with both hands, gritting my teeth, putting every ounce of strength I had into turning it. "Come on!" I screamed at the metal. "Move!" "Emily!" I looked down. Nicholas was standing in the doorway of the atrium, looking up at me with wide eyes. "What are you doing? Get down! You'll freeze!" "The pipes!" I screamed back, pointing at the vibrating copper. "The water line runs over the server room. If these burst, you lose the mainframe. We have to drain the system." He looked at the pipes, then at me. He didn't argue. He didn't tell me to be safe. He realized instantly that I was right. He sprinted to the ladder. "I'll turn it. You guide the pressure release." He climbed up behind me. There wasn't room for 2 people on the ladder, so he stood on the rung below me, his chest pressed against my back. His body heat was a sudden, shocking relief against my frozen skin. He reached around me, his large hands covering mine on the red wheel. "On 3, he roared over the wind. 1, 2, 3. We pulled together. I felt the muscles in his arms bunch and harden against me. The metal groaned, screeched, and then, with a violent jerk, gave way. The wheel spun. "Keep turning," I yelled. "All the way to the right." Nicholas cranked the wheel until it locked shut. The water flow was cut, but the pressure was still in the pipes. "The release valve," I shouted, pointing to a smaller lever near the floor, behind the large fern pot. "We have to dump the remaining water, or it will still burst." Nicholas jumped down from the ladder, splashing into a puddle that was already forming a skin of ice. He scrambled behind the fern. "It's stuck," he yelled. "Kick it," I instructed. "It's a ball valve. Just kick the lever flat." He drew back his leg and delivered a kick that would have broken a door down. His dress shoe connected with the lever. Pshh! A jet of water sprayed out, soaking Nicholas's tuxedo pants instantly, but the groaning in the ceiling stopped. The vibration ceased. The system was drained. Nicholas stood up, water dripping from his legs. He looked at me, shivering on the ladder. He didn't smile. He reached up and pulled me down into his arms. "We need to get inside," he said, his teeth chattering. "Now!" He practically carried me back into the living room. The windows were still wide open, snow piling up on the furniture. The temperature was now critical. I could feel my brain slowing down, my movements becoming clumsy. Hypothermia was setting in fast. "Server room," Nicholas commanded. "It's interior, no windows. The servers generate heat. It's the only warm place left." We ran down the hallway. It was pitch black, guided only by the emergency lights on his phone. He slammed his shoulder against the heavy steel door of the server room. It opened. We stumbled inside. The difference was immediate. It wasn't hot, but the hum of the rack-mounted servers created a pocket of dry, tepid air. It was maybe 50 degrees in there, compared to the sub-zero nightmare outside. Nicholas slammed the door shut and engaged the manual deadbolt. "Safe," he breathed, sliding down the wall until he hit the floor. I sank down next to him. The adrenaline crash was hitting me hard. My body started to shake uncontrollably. Violent tremors racked my frame. We stopped the water," I stuttered, my teeth clicking together so hard I thought they would crack. "You stopped it," Nicholas said. He reached out and touched my arm. His hand was freezing. "You saved the system. If that water had hit the racks," he gestured to the blinking lights of the servers around us, "we would be blind." He looked at me, really looked at me. My red dress was damp from the mist in the atrium. My lips were blue. "You're freezing," he said. The concern in his voice cut through his own exhaustion. "So, are you?" I managed to say. "Your pee pants are wet." "Hypothermia," Nicholas stated, his voice clinical but urgent. "We need to get dry, and we need body heat."
"It's the only way to raise our core temperature fast enough." He didn't make it a question. He didn't make it sexual. It was a tactical necessity. "Take the dress off," he said. "It's damp silk. It's pulling heat away from you." Under normal circumstances, standing in a server room asking a man to strip would have been insane, but I couldn't feel my toes. My vision was tunneling. I reached for the zipper on the side of the dress, but my fingers were useless claws. I couldn't grip the tiny metal tab. "I can't," I whispered, panic rising. "My hands." Nicholas moved closer. "Let me." His hands were shaking too, but he had the discipline to force them steady. He found the zipper. He pulled it down. The red silk pooled at my feet. I stepped out of it, wearing only the thin lace undergarments I had put on hours ago. The air in the room hit my skin, and I gasped. Nicholas was already removing his soaking wet jacket and shirt. He kicked off his wet shoes and peeled off the sodden trousers. He was left in his boxer briefs. He grabbed a drop cloth that was sitting on a shelf, a canvas sheet used for maintenance. It wasn't a blanket, but it was dry. He spread it on the floor between the server racks. "Come here," he ordered. We lay down on the canvas. Nicholas pulled me against him. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling my back against his chest, interlacing our legs. The shock of his skin against mine was intense. He was cold, like marble, but deep down, there was a furnace burning. "Stay still," he whispered against my ear. "Let the heat transfer." I buried my face in his arm. I closed my eyes and focused on breathing. In, out, in, out. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the shivering began to subside. I could feel the warmth seeping from him into me, and from me into him. It was a primitive, biological magic. "They tried to freeze us out," Nicholas murmured, his voice rumbling in his chest against my back. "They couldn't get past the bulletproof glass, so they used the smart home hub. Clever. Kenta is more tech-savvy than his father. You need to fix the firewall," I mumbled, the drowsiness of warming up starting to take over. "I will," he promised, "once I can feel my fingers again." He tightened his grip on me. His hand rested flat on my stomach, his thumb tracing the line of my hip bone. "You were incredible out there," he said softly. "Most people would have run for the door. You ran toward the danger." "I know pipes," I whispered. "I know what ice does to things that are trying to grow." "You saved us," he repeated. "Emily, do you understand? You didn't just save the computer, you saved our position. If this system went down, the perimeter sensors would fail. They could have walked right in the front door." I turned in his arms, shifting so I was facing him. The space between the server racks was narrow, forcing us to be completely intertwined. In the blinking blue LEDs of the server lights, his face looked sharp, stripped of all the social masks he wore. "We're a good team," I said. He looked at my lips, then my eyes. "We are." He reached up and brushed a strand of hair away from my face. His touch was no longer cold. It was warm. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "For the blizzard? For bringing this to your door.
for the cold, for the fear. I'm not afraid, I lied. Well, maybe it wasn't a lie anymore. I was afraid in the shop when you smashed the table. I was afraid when the courier brought the flour. But right now, I'm just angry. Nicholas's eyes flared with approval. Good. Hold on to that. Anger keeps you warm. What are we going to do, Nicholas, when the sun comes up? First, I reboot the system manually from this terminal. He gestured to the console behind him. I lock them out. Then I turn the heat back on. Then we finish it. He said, darker than the shadows in the room. They escalated. They attacked my home. They attacked you. There are no more rules. He pulled me closer, burying his face in the crook of my neck. I could feel his heartbeat against my chest, steady, powerful, reassuring. But for now, he whispered, we just survived the night. I rested my head on his shoulder. The hum of the servers was a white noise lullaby. The canvas was rough against my skin, and the floor was hard. But I had never felt safer. We lay there for hours, suspended in time. The storm raged outside the open windows of the living room, burying the penthouse in snow, freezing the furniture, destroying the art. But in this tiny steel box, we were alive. At some point, the shivering stopped completely. The heat between us became stifling, heavy with something else. Emily, Nicholas whispered. Yeah? I can't stop thinking about the dress. I laughed, a tired, breathless sound. The one on the floor? The way you looked in it. Before the wine. Before the cold. He shifted his weight, his leg pressing firmly between mine. You looked like a queen. I felt like an imposter, I admitted. Diamonds and silk. That's not me. I'm dirt under the fingernails and aprons. No, Nicholas said fiercely. That's where you're wrong. The silk is just wrapping. The diamond is carbon under pressure. That's you. You're the strongest thing in this room. He kissed me then. It wasn't like the kiss in the car. That had been adrenaline and showmanship. This was slow. It was gratitude and reverence. He kissed me like I was the only source of oxygen in the room. My hands found his shoulders, sliding over the smooth muscle. Nicholas, I'm here. Don't let go. Never. We didn't have sex. It wasn't the time, and the floor was too hard, the situation too precarious. But the intimacy of lying half naked with him, skin to skin, keeping each other alive, was more profound than any physical act. It was a binding contract. Around 6 a.m., the wind outside seemed to die down. Nicholas sat up, groaning as his stiff muscles protested. He looked at the server console. I have enough feeling in my hands to type, he said. He pulled himself up and sat at the desk chair. I watched him work, the blue light reflecting off his bare back. He typed furiously, lines of code scrolling down the screen. Got you, he muttered, isolating the external port, rerouting the admin access. He hit enter with a decisive strike. System reboot initiated. Climate control, online. Perimeter seals, engaging. A distant mechanical whirring echoed through the walls. The windows were closing. It's done. Nicholas exhaled, slumping back in the chair. I've cut the remote access. They can't get back in. He turned to me, extending his hand. Let's go check the damage. We dressed quickly in the damp clothes. It was unpleasant, but necessary to leave the room. Walking back into the living room was like walking into a disaster zone. Snow had drifted halfway across the Persian rug. The temperature was still freezing, but I could hear the vents kicking on, blasting hot air. The windows were sealed shut. The winter garden was a tragedy. The tropical plants were black and wilted, shocked to death by the frost. The ficus tree I had cleaned was drooping, its leaves brown. I walked over to the glass door. They're dead, I said softly. Nicholas came up behind me, wrapping his dry blazer, which he had grabbed from the coat closet, around my shoulders. We'll replant, he said. Everything. It takes years to grow a tree like that, I said. Then we start today, he replied. He turned me around to face him. The morning light was gray and weak, filtering through the snow-streaked windows. We looked like wrecks, Hair messy, clothes ruined, eyes shadowed with fatigue. "Go take a hot shower," Nicholas ordered gently. "A real one. I'll make coffee, and then I'm going to make a phone call," he said, his eyes shifting to the horizon where the sun was trying to break through. "I'm going to call every favor I have. I'm going to drain their accounts, burn their remaining assets, and drive them out of this city." He paused, looking at the dead garden. "They killed my plants," he said, a dark humor touching his lips. "Now it's personal." I smiled, despite everything. The plants were personal. The dress was business. "Go." He nudged me toward the hallway. As I walked toward the master bathroom, he insisted I use his, as it had the steam function. I looked back. Nicholas was standing amidst the snow in his living room, shirtless, holding a phone to his ear. He didn't look defeated. He looked like a king standing in the ruins of a battlefield, planning his conquest. I turned the water on as hot as I could stand it. As the steam filled the shower, washing away the cold and the fear, I made a decision. I wasn't going to just replant the garden. I was going to help him burn down the weeds. When I stepped out of the shower, wrapped in a thick robe, Nicholas was waiting in the bedroom. He had changed into jeans and a sweater, civilian clothes. He held 2 mugs of coffee. "Report from the field," he said, handing me a mug. "The police are treating the warehouse fire as arson, but the evidence is inconclusive. My contacts in the precinct lost the file, and the hack? Traced to a server farm in Macau. Untouchable, but it confirms it was them." He sat on the edge of the bed. "Emily, there's something else." "What?" "I found the access point they used to get into the system," he said. "It wasn't a brute force hack. They had a keylogger." "A what?" "A program that records keystrokes. Someone installed it physically, inside this apartment." I froze, the coffee cup halfway to my lips. "But nobody comes in here. You said the staff is vetted." "They are," Nicholas said. "But 3 months ago, before you came, I had a maintenance crew in here to fix the HVAC. Green Dragon has a subsidiary that does HVAC repair." My eyes widened. "They've been planning this for months, since before the flowers, since before me." "Yes," Nicholas said. "But they waited until last night to trigger it. They waited until you were here." "Why?" "Because they wanted us together," Nicholas said, his voice grim. "They wanted to take out the king and the queen on the same chessboard." "They missed," I said. "They missed," Nicholas agreed. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the frozen city. "And now it's our turn to move." He turned back to me, and the look in his eyes was terrifying and beautiful. "Get dressed, Emily. We're going to the office." "The office?" "My real office," he said. "We're going to look at the Green Dragon logistics map you drew, and you're going to show me exactly where their weak points are." I set the coffee down. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. "Give me 5 minutes," I said. "Take 10, he replied. "We have all day. And for the rest of their short lives, they are going to wish the cold had killed us." The map glowing on the monitors of Nicholas's home office was a digital reconstruction of the Aurora Industrial Park. But to me, it looked like a graveyard of my childhood memories. I traced the perimeter of the largest structure with my finger, leaving a faint smudge on the expensive screen. "Here," I said, my voice steady despite the fatigue dragging at my eyelids. "This is the old drainage outflow. When I was a kid, my dad used to bring me here to pick up bulk orders of peat moss. I used to play near the creek while they loaded the truck. There's a grate here, behind the rhododendron nursery. It leads directly into the sub-basement where they keep the heavy machinery." Nicholas leaned over my shoulder, his presence a wall of heat against my back. He smelled of coffee and dangerous resolve. He studied the point I was indicating, comparing it to the satellite imagery his security team had pulled. "The blueprints list that as a sealed ventilation shaft," he murmured. "It's not sealed," I corrected him. "It's overgrown. They stopped using it for ventilation in the 90s when the EPA cracked down on chemical runoff, but they never cemented it over. If they are cooking meth or processing opioids in there, they need airflow. They probably reopened it from the inside to vent the fumes without alerting the neighbors." Nicholas straightened up, looking at me with that intensity that always made my breath hitch. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. I said. If you try to go in through the front loading bays, they'll see you coming a mile away. The security cameras cover the entire asphalt lot. But the creek side? It's a blind spot. It always has been. He walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered city. He had been pacing like a caged tiger since we discovered the keylogger on his system. The knowledge that the Yamaguchi clan had been watching us, listening to us, inside his own home, had stripped away the last layers of his civilized veneer. He wasn't a CEO anymore. He was a warlord preparing a counterstrike. It's a tactical nightmare, Nicholas said, turning back to me. But if that grate is open, it's our only way to bypass their perimeter sensors. It's the only way, I agreed. Nicholas, you have to hit them where they feel safe. They think they own the supply chain. They think that warehouse is a fortress. It is a fortress, he said grimly, which is why I'm not sending a team. I'm going myself. You can't go alone, I protested, standing up. That's suicide. I'm not going alone. I'm taking my elite unit. But I am leading the breach. I need to see it with my own eyes. I need to verify that this is the hub before I burn it down. He walked over to the gun safe built into the wall of the office. As he punched in the code, the heavy steel door swung open, revealing an arsenal that made me shiver. He began selecting weapons with practiced efficiency, checking chambers, loading magazines, sliding knives into sheaths. Nicholas, I said, walking over to him. I reached out and touched his arm, stopping him from loading a fresh clip into a handgun. Promise me something. He looked down at me, his dark eyes softening slightly. Anything. The front section of the warehouse, I said. The part that faces the road. That's where they keep the legitimate inventory. The seasonal stock. Poinsettias, winter jasmine, the mother plants for the spring propagation. He frowned. Emily, I'm going there to destroy their operation. I can't worry about inventory. They are living things, I insisted. They didn't ask to be part of a drug front. If you burn the chemical lab in the back, try to spare the greenhouses in the front. Please. For me, it was a ridiculous request. I knew that. Asking a mafia boss to be careful with petunias while he was raiding a heavily armed compound. But Nicholas didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss me. He looked at my face, searching for something. And then he nodded. I'll trigger the fire suppression system in the front zones before I ignite the rear, he promised. The plants will get wet, but they won't burn. Thank you, I whispered. He leaned down and kissed me hard, a kiss that tasted of finality and fierce promise. Stay here. Monitor the police scanners. If anything goes wrong, if I don't call you by midnight, you initiate the ghost protocol. You take the cash in the safe, you go to the airfield, and you disappear. I'm not going anywhere, I said fiercely, gripping his sweater. You're coming back, you have to. You still owe me a new table. A dark chuckle escaped him. Right, the table. He pulled away, grabbed his tactical vest, and walked out the door. I listened to his footsteps fading down the hallway, the heavy thud of the elevator doors closing. And then, silence. The waiting was a physical pain. I sat in the office, surrounded by the glow of monitors. I had pulled up the live feed of the Chicago Police Dispatch on one screen and the weather radar on the other. A fresh band of snow was moving in, which was good for Nicholas. Heavy snow meant low visibility. It meant the world would be quiet. Hours bled into one another. I paced. I drank coffee that had turned cold. I replayed the layout of the Aurora facility in my mind, praying that my memory from 15 years ago hadn't failed me. What if they had sealed the grate? What if they had put a sensor there? I stared at the phone, willing it to ring. Every minute that passed felt like a tightening noose. I imagined him crawling through freezing mud, breaching steel doors, facing men who killed for a living. Please, I thought, directing the plea to the universe, to God, to anyone listening. Bring him back. I don't care about the debts. I don't care about the shop. Just bring him back. The Aurora Distribution Center was a hulking shadow against the snow-blind sky. Nicholas lay prone on the frozen bank of the creek, the icy mud soaking through his tactical gear. He didn't feel the cold. His adrenaline was a roaring fire in his veins. Through the scope of his night vision goggles, The world was awash of green phosphorescence. He saw the grate Emily had described. It was there, hidden behind a tangle of dead rhododendrons and chain-link fencing that had rusted through. Just as she had said. Target acquired, he whispered into his comms. Breach point confirmed. Alpha team, on me. Bravo, hold the perimeter. If anything runs out the back door, put it down. He moved forward, cutting through the wire with silent shears. The grate was heavy, but the hinges were rusted almost off. He pried it open, the screech of metal masked by the howling wind. He slid into the darkness. The tunnel smelled of rot and old chemicals. It was tight, claustrophobic. But Nicholas moved with the fluidity of a predator. He crawled for 50 yards until he saw light filtering through a floor vent above him. Voices. He pushed the vent up. He was in a storage room. He pulled himself up, silent as a ghost, his weapon raised. The facility was massive. The front section, as Emily had said, was filled with rows of shelving holding legitimate gardening supplies. Bags of soil, ceramic pots, crates of dormant bulbs. But as he moved deeper, the air changed. The smell of fertilizer was replaced by the sharp, acrid sting of acetone and ammonia. He found the false wall behind a stack of pallets. It slid open to reveal the heart of the operation. It wasn't just a warehouse. It was a factory. Stainless steel vats bubbled with clear liquid. Conveyor belts moved bags of fertilizer that were being stuffed with vacuum-sealed bricks of white powder. Men in hazmat suits and armed guards with automatic rifles patrolled the catwalks. Nicholas signaled his team. Execute. The firefight was brief, violent, and surgical. Nicholas didn't waste bullets. He moved through the chaos like a wraith, taking down 2 guards before they could even raise their weapons. His men flooded the room, securing the catwalks. Within 5 minutes, the floor was theirs. The Yamaguchi technicians were zip-tied on the ground. The guards were neutralized. Nicholas walked to the main office overlooking the production floor. He kicked the door open. Inside, a terrified middle manager was trying to shred documents. Nicholas grabbed him by the collar and threw him away from the desk. The ledgers, Nicholas barked. Where are the physical ledgers? I don't know. Everything is digital, the man stammered. Nicholas pistol whipped him, a controlled strike to the temple. Don't lie to me. Kenta Yamaguchi doesn't trust the cloud. Where are the books? The man pointed to a floor safe hidden under a rug. Nicholas blew the hinges off with a breaching charge. Inside, he found them. Thick, leather-bound books and a stack of hard drives. He flipped through one. It was all there. The extortion payments from local businesses, the bribes to city officials, the shipping manifest for the drugs. This was the nail in the coffin. He shoved the evidence into his waterproof pack. Then he turned to his second-in-command. Rig it, Nicholas ordered. Thermite charges on the vats. Incendiary rounds on the chemical storage. I want this place to burn so hot they see it in Japan. Yes, boss. As his men set the charges, Nicholas walked back toward the front of the warehouse. He reached the heavy fire doors that separated the drug lab from the legitimate greenhouse supply area. He paused, his hand on the lever. He remembered Emily's voice. They are living things. Please. He looked at the control panel on the wall. Fire suppression system. Zone A. Greenhouse. He smashed the glass cover with the butt of his rifle and yanked the manual activation handle. Instantly, the sprinklers in the front section hissed to life, drenching the innocent plants in a protective curtain of water. He watched for a second to make sure the pressure was holding. Promise kept, he muttered. He stepped back into the lab. Fire in the hole. He led his team out the back exit, sprinting into the snowy night as the first explosion rocked the foundation. A massive fireball erupted behind them, turning the falling snow into sizzling steam. The chemical lab was consumed in seconds. Nicholas didn't look back. He had the books. He had the win. And he had a woman waiting for him. The elevator doors opened, and the smell hit me before I saw him. Smoke. That distinct clinging scent of burning structure and chemicals. I jumped up from the office chair, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. Nicholas stood there. He looked terrible. His face was streaked with soot, his tactical gear was torn at the shoulder, and he was soaked to the bone. But he was standing. He was whole, Nicholas! I ran to him. I didn't care about the soot or the smell. I slammed into his chest, wrapping my arms around his neck. He caught me, dropping his heavy pack to the floor, and buried his face in my hair. "I'm back," he rasped, his voice rough from the smoke. "I'm back, Emily." "You're hurt," I said, pulling back to inspect a cut on his cheek. "Just a scratch. Debris." He dismissed it. He looked at me with a wild, triumphant energy burning through his exhaustion. "We got it all. The books, the drives. The entire operation is ashes. And," I asked, hesitating, "and the front section is wet," he said, a small crooked smile breaking through the grime on his face. "I triggered the sprinklers. Your mother plants are safe. The fire doors held." I let out a sob that was half laugh. "You crazy idiot. You actually did it." "I told you," he said, gripping my waist. "I don't break promises." He walked me backward into the living room, kicking the door of the office shut. He led me to the fireplace, which was crackling with a gas fire he must have turned on remotely, or maybe the staff had returned. No, we were alone. He reached into his jacket pocket, the inner one, protected from the water and the fire. He pulled out a single folded piece of thick paper. It was singed at the edges, smelling of smoke. "What is that?" I asked. "While I was in the safe," Nicholas said, looking at the paper, "I found the file labeled with your shop's address. It was in the extortion pile. This is the contract they were going to force you to sign. The transfer of deed. And this," he pulled out a second paper, a pink slip. "This is the debt note they bought from your bank." My knees went weak. "They bought my mortgage? They owned you, Emily," Nicholas said softly. "On paper, at least. They were going to call the loan next week. Foreclose on you." He held the papers out to the fire. The flames licked at the edges. "Nicholas," I breathed. "You don't owe them anything," he said. "Not a cent. Not a flower. Not a minute of sleep." He dropped the papers into the fire. We watched them burn. The paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash, floating up the chimney. My debt, my fear, my chains, gone. Nicholas turned to me. The firelight danced in his dark eyes, reflecting the raw, naked desire that had been simmering between us for days, suppressed by danger and cold. "I'm dirty," he said. "I smell like smoke." "I don't care," I whispered. I reached for the buckles of his tactical vest. "Take it off." He let me undress him. I unclipped the heavy Kevlar, letting it drop to the floor with a thud. I pulled his ruined shirt over his head. His skin was hot, marked with fresh bruises and old scars, covered in a sheen of sweat and soot. He reached for me then. There was no hesitation this time. "No, we shouldn't. No, it's dangerous." The danger was burning in a warehouse in Aurora. Here, now, there was only us. He picked me up, my legs instinctively wrapping around his waist, and carried me to the bedroom. He didn't turn on the lights. The glow from the city outside and the open door to the hallway was enough. He laid me on the bed, his body following mine down, a heavy, solid weight that I welcomed. "Emily," he said, his voice a low growl against my throat. "Do you know what I thought about when the charges went off? When the roof came down?" "What?" I gasped as his hands moved over me, possessive and claiming. "I thought about the fact that I hadn't properly kissed you yet. Not really. Not without a clock ticking. We have time now," I said, running my hands through his dark, messy hair. "We have all night. I'm going to ruin you for anyone else," he warned, pulling back to look at me. "You know that, right? After this, there is no going back to normal. You are part of me now." "I don't want normal," I told him, looking straight into his soul. "I want you. I want the storm." He groaned, a sound of surrender and victory, and captured my lips. The night became a blur of sensation. It wasn't gentle. We had both been running on adrenaline and fear for too long for it to be gentle. But it wasn't violent. It was intense. It was a desperate affirmation of life. His touch was everywhere, erasing the cold of the blizzard, erasing the memory of the chrysanthemum. He worshipped my body like it was the only holy thing left in his world, and I met him. Match for match. Fire for fire. I wasn't the fragile florist anymore. I was the woman who had guided him through the dark, the woman who had ordered a hit, the woman who lay beneath the mafia boss and felt only power, not fear. Later, much later, we lay tangled in the sheets. The room quiet, except for our breathing. Nicholas was asleep, one arm thrown heavily over my waist, keeping me pinned to his side even in his dreams. I watched him sleep. His face was younger when he relaxed, the harsh lines of command smoothed out. I reached out and gently brushed a smudge of soot from his shoulder. I thought about the hard drive sitting on the desk in the other room. Tomorrow, Nicholas would make the calls. He would freeze their assets. He would cripple the Yamaguchi clan. We had won. But as I looked at the shadows stretching across the room, a small, cold knot formed in my stomach. We had hit them hard. We had humiliated them. Kenta Yamaguchi didn't strike me as the kind of man who accepted defeat. He was the kind of man who flipped the board when he was losing. I snuggled closer to Nicholas, seeking his warmth. We had won the battle. But the war was probably just beginning. Sleep, I whispered to the sleeping wolf beside me. Tomorrow, we fight again. But for tonight, in the safety of the penthouse, with my debts turned to ash and his arms around me, it was enough. We were alive. We were together. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I was the center of his world. The morning sun that filtered through the penthouse windows was deceptive. It painted the ruined living room in soft golden hues, making the piles of snow from the night before look like sparkling dust rather than the aftermath of a siege. Nicholas was already dressed, not in a suit, but in clean dark jeans and a black thermal shirt that hugged the muscles of his arms. He stood by the kitchen island, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice a low, terrifying rumble of satisfaction. "Freeze it all," he commanded, staring out at the skyline. The offshore accounts in the Caymans, the shell corporations in Delaware. I want every cent associated with the Green Dragon blocked by the time the market opens. If the bank manager hesitates, remind him who sits on the board of directors. He hung up and looked at me. I was sitting on a bar stool, nursing a mug of tea, wearing one of his oversized cashmere sweaters that fell to my knees. The events of the warehouse raid felt like a fever dream, but the smell of smoke still lingering faintly in his hair was real. "It's done," Nicholas said, setting the phone down. "By noon, the Yamaguchi clan won't be able to buy a pack of gum in this city. They are insolvent. Kenta is finished. He won't take that quietly," I said, a shiver running down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold draft. "You burned his legacy, Nicholas. Men like that, they don't retire. They detonate. Let him try," Nicholas said, walking over to me. He stepped between my knees, resting his hands on my thighs, his thumbs rubbing soothing circles on the denim of the jeans I had borrowed. "He has no men, no money, and no leverage. He is a ghost. Ghosts are hard to kill," I whispered. He leaned down to kiss me, a soft, lingering touch that was meant to banish my fears. But before his lips could meet mine, a sound shattered the morning calm. It wasn't his business phone. It wasn't the secure line. It was a harsh, discordant ringing coming from the pocket of his discarded tactical vest, which lay in a heap by the door. Nicholas froze. He pulled back, his eyes narrowing. He walked over to the vest and pulled out a disposable burner phone, one he only used for extreme emergencies, a number known by less than 5 people. He answered it on speaker. "Rinaldi." There was no voice on the other end, just the sound of heavy breathing and a muffled sob that made my blood turn to ice. Then, a video feed flickered onto the tiny screen. Nicholas went rigid. I slid off the stool and ran to his side, looking down at the phone in his hand. The video was shaky, filmed in a dim room. In the center of the frame, tied to a heavy wooden chair, was Sophia. She looked terrified. Her dark curly hair was matted with sweat, her lip was split, and her hands were bound behind her back with thick zip ties. She was shaking violently. A hand entered the frame, a hand wearing a gold signet ring with a dragon crest. It gripped Sophia's hair and yanked her head back, forcing her to look at the camera. "Say hello to your brother," Kenta Yamaguchi's voice sneered from behind the camera. It sounded wet, unstable, the voice of a man who had been awake for days and had lost everything. Nick! Sophia screamed, the sound tearing through the phone's speaker. Nick, don't come. It's a trap, don't— The hand struck her, a brutal backhand that silenced her and knocked the chair sideways. Nicholas let out a sound I had never heard from a human being before. It was a guttural roar of pure, animalistic agony. His hand crushed the phone so hard I thought the plastic would shatter. Kenta! Nicholas screamed at the screen. If you touch her again, I will flay you alive. You took my warehouse. Kenta's voice hissed, sounding closer to the microphone now. You burned my birthright. You made me look weak. Now I take what is yours. An eye for an eye, Rinaldi. A legacy for a legacy. The camera panned back to Sophia, who was weeping silently now. You have 1 hour, Kenta said. Come to the North Harbor shipping yards. Pier 4. Alone, unarmed. If I see a single one of your guards, if I smell a cop, I put a bullet in her brain and dump her in the lake. 1 hour, Nicholas. Tick-tock. The screen went black. Nicholas stared at the blank phone for a heartbeat, his chest heaving. Then, he exploded. He turned and hurled the phone against the wall. It shattered into pieces. He grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the console table and smashed it into the mirror above the fireplace. Shards of glass rained down, reflecting the fractured monster he had become. I'm going to kill him, Nicholas chanted, pacing the room like a caged beast. I'm going to rip his throat out with my teeth. He stormed toward the gun safe in the office. Nicholas, stop! I yelled, chasing after him. You can't go there. He said Pier 4. That's open ground. He'll have snipers. He'll kill you before you even get out of the car. I don't care, Nicholas roared, spinning around to face me. His eyes were wild, red-rimmed with fury. That is my sister, Emily. That is my baby sister. Do you expect me to sit here and negotiate? He has her. He wants you dead. I grabbed his arm, trying to anchor him. If you go to the pier, you both die. That's the end game. He doesn't want money. He wants a murder-suicide. Then I trade my life for hers, Nicholas said, his voice cracking. He ripped his arm from my grasp and punched the code into the safe. If I have to die so she lives, I do it. That's the deal. That has always been the deal. He grabbed a handgun and shoved it into his waistband. He grabbed a knife. He was moving on instinct, blind and deaf to reason. Nicholas, please, think, I begged, standing between him and the door. Kenta is desperate. He's hiding. Why would he take her to a shipping pier? It's too exposed. It's too cold. Where was the video filmed? It doesn't matter, Nicholas shouted, trying to push past me. It matters, I screamed back, shoving him in the chest with both hands. Look at the video. Think, Nicholas. You're a strategist. Stop acting like a brawler. Where was she? He stopped, breathing hard, looking down at me. It was a room, a dark room. Show me the backup, I demanded. Your phone automatically backs up media files to the cloud server, right? Pull it up on the monitor. Now. We don't have time. We have 50 minutes, I snapped. If you drive to the pier, you die in 20. Give me 2 minutes to look at the damn video. Something in my voice, maybe the echo of the command I had used when we saved the server room, got through to him. He blinked, shaking his head as if clearing a fog. He walked to the desk and punched a key. The large monitor flickered to life. He accessed the cloud backup. The video file was there. He clicked play. Sophia's terrified face filled the massive 4K screen. Pause, I ordered. He hit the spacebar. Look at the background, I said, leaning in, my eyes scanning the blurry details behind Sophia's chair. It's not a shipping container. It's not a warehouse office. Look at the wall. Nicholas squinted. It's peeling paint. It's a dump. No, I said, stepping closer, my finger tracing the pattern on the screen. That's not paint. That's wallpaper. See the repeating pattern? It's faded, yellowed with age, but you can see the design. Blue hydrangeas intertwined with gold ivy vines. And look at the baseboard. That's mahogany wainscoting, hand-carved. You don't find hand-carved mahogany in a shipping yard. So he's in a house, Nicholas said, pacing again. An abandoned house. That could be anywhere in the city. No, not anywhere, I murmured. my mind racing back through years of estate sales, auctions, and floral conventions. I knew that pattern. I had seen it before. I closed my eyes, visualizing the memory. 3 years ago, a liquidation auction for a historic property that had been tied up in probate court for a decade. I had gone hoping to buy some vintage crystal vases. I had walked through the lobby, smelling the dust and the decay of former grandeur. I opened my eyes. It's the Hotel Blackwell. Nicholas froze. The Blackwell? That place has been condemned since 2010. It's a rot in the middle of the historic district. I went to the auction, I said, pointing at the screen. That wallpaper, the Victorian Garden collection. It was custom commissioned for the Blackwell in 1920. I remember because I wanted to buy a roll for the shop, but it was glued to the walls. And look. I pointed to the edge of the frame. That brass sconce shaped like a calla lily. They are unique to the Blackwell suites. Kenta isn't at the pier. The pier is the kill zone where he wants you to go. He's hiding in the hotel. Nicholas stared at the screen, then at me. The wild panic in his eyes was replaced by a razor-sharp focus. The monster was back, but this time, it was a calculating one. The Blackwell, he whispered. The Yamaguchi used a shell company to buy a block of distressed assets in that district last year. I thought it was for tax write-offs. It's a fortress, I said. Thick walls, soundproofed rooms, underground service tunnels. It's the perfect place to hide a hostage. Nicholas grabbed his tactical radio. Team leader, assemble the unit. We have a location change. Forget the pier. The target is the Hotel Blackwell. I want a silent perimeter established in 10 minutes. We breach from the service entrance in the alley. He turned to me, and for a second, his face crumbled. He grabbed my face in his hands and kissed me hard on the forehead. You just saved her life, he rasped. If I had gone to the pier. Go get her, I said, pushing him toward the door. Bring her home. Stay on the line, he ordered, handing me an earpiece. I want you on comms. You guide us. You know the layout? I know the lobby and the first floor suites, I said, putting the earpiece in. Go. Nicholas didn't look back. He ran out the door, and this time, he wasn't running to his death. He was running to a war he intended to win. The next 30 minutes were an agony of static and silence. I sat in the office, staring at the map of the Hotel Blackwell I had pulled up on the screen. It was a labyrinth of 300 rooms, but based on the video, the wainscoting suggested a suite. The expensive rooms were on the second floor. Alpha 1 in position. Nicholas's voice crackled in my ear. He sounded calm, deadly. Perimeter secure. No movement on the street. They are expecting me at the harbor. Breach point is the kitchen delivery door, I said into the mic, my voice shaking slightly. South side. It leads directly to the service elevator. Copy. Breaching in 3, 2, 1. I heard the dull thud of a suppressed door breach. Then the sound of boots on concrete. We are inside, Nicholas whispered. Clear. Moving to the stairwell. Elevator is too risky. I closed my eyes, visualizing the hotel. The grand staircase would be blocked or trapped. The service stairs were narrow. Second floor, I said. The suites with that wallpaper are the garden suites. Rooms 201 through 210. Roger, approaching the second landing. Suddenly, the silence broke. Contact! Someone yelled. Gunfire erupted in my ear. It was loud, chaotic. I flinched, gripping the edge of the desk. Target left! Suppression fire! Nicholas was shouting commands. Move up! Don't let them pin us! Nicholas! I screamed uselessly. I'm good, he barked back, over the sound of automatic fire. 2 tangos down, moving to the hallway. They know we're here. The sound of the firefight shifted. I heard wood splintering, heavy footsteps running. Room 204, Nicholas yelled. I hear shouting inside. Breach! Breach! A massive explosion echoed through the line, a flashbang. Clear left! Clear right! Then, a voice I recognized. Kenta, screaming in Japanese, frantic, terrified. Drop it! Nicholas roared. Drop the weapon or I will paint this room with your brains. Back off! Kenta screamed, his voice cracking. I'll kill her. I swear I'll do it. Look at me, Kenta, Nicholas demanded, his voice dropping to that terrifyingly low register. The pier is empty. Your men are dead. My team is in the hallway. You have nowhere to go. You lost. I am a dragon, Kenta shrieked. You are a corpse, Nicholas corrected. I heard a scuffle, a muffled gunshot, then a heavy thud, like a body hitting the floor. Silence. I stopped breathing. The static hissed in my ear. Nicholas? I whispered. Sophia, look at me. Nicholas's voice came through, gentle now, broken. It's okay. It's okay, baby. I've got you. I heard sobbing, deep, wrenching sobs. Status, the team leader's voice cut in. Target neutralized. Hostage secure. We are moving out. I slumped forward onto the desk, burying my face in my hands. Tears streamed down my face, soaking the sleeves of Nicholas's sweater. Emily? Nicholas's voice was back on the comms. Emily, are you there? I'm here, I choked out. Is she? She's safe, he said. We're coming home. Clear the living room. She's going to need space. I'm ready, I said. Come home. The wait for them to return was different from the wait for the raid. It wasn't fearful. It was numb. I moved mechanically, clearing the broken glass from the mirror Nicholas had smashed. I turned up the heat. I prepared blankets on the sofa. I made tea, lots of it, with shaking hands. The elevator chimed. I stood by the fireplace, bracing myself. Nicholas walked in first. He was covered in dust, his black shirt torn, a smear of blood on his forehead that wasn't his. He looked exhausted, older by 10 years, but his eyes were clear. He didn't come to me. He turned and extended his hand toward the elevator. Sophia stepped out. She looked small, so incredibly small, wrapped in a large tactical jacket one of the men must have given her. Her face was bruised, her lips swollen, and her wrists were raw where the zip ties had been. She was trembling, her eyes darting around the room as if expecting another trap. It's okay, Nicholas said softly, guiding her in. You're safe. We're in the tower. Nobody gets in here. Sophia looked at him. Then she looked at me. I didn't know what to expect. I was the stranger, the florist who was sleeping with her brother, the woman who had been part of the reason this war started. But Sophia didn't see a stranger. She looked at me, and her eyes filled with fresh tears. You, she rasped, her voice hoarse from screaming. You knew about the wallpaper. Nicholas must have told her on the ride over. I like vintage things, I said, a weak smile trembling on my lips. I'm glad I have a good memory. Sophia didn't speak. She crossed the room, moving faster than I expected, and crashed into me. I caught her, wrapping my arms around her shaking frame. She buried her face in my shoulder, sobbing uncontrollably. It wasn't the polite hug of an acquaintance. It was the desperate cling of a survivor thanking the lifeline. Thank you, she cried into my neck. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. I held her tight, stroking her matted hair. I looked up and met Nicholas's eyes over her shoulder. He was watching us with an expression of such raw, unguarded emotion that it took my breath away. He wasn't looking at me with desire, or gratitude, or even love. He was looking at me like I was the foundation of his entire world. He walked over and wrapped his massive arms around both of us, sandwiching us together. He kissed the top of Sophia's head, then he kissed my forehead, resting his chin there. Family, he whispered, the words sounding like a vow. We stood there for a long time, a tangle of bruised bodies and frayed nerves in the middle of the luxury penthouse. The war was over. Kenta was dead. The threat was gone. But as I held Sophia Rinaldi, feeling her tears soak my shirt, I realized something. I wasn't just under Nicholas's protection anymore. I was part of the pack. I had earned my place not by marriage or by blood, but by fire. I need a shower, Sophia sniffled finally, pulling back but keeping hold of my hand. And I need to burn these clothes. I have sweatpants, I said, and really expensive shampoo. Come on. I led her toward the guest suite, my old room. Nicholas stayed in the living room. As I reached the doorway, I looked back. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city. He pulled the gun from his waistband and set it on the table. Then he pulled out the knife. Then the earpiece. He was disarming himself. He looked at me. He didn't say a word, but the message was clear. You did this. You fixed this. I nodded, a silent acknowledgement, and turned back to Sophia. Let's get you cleaned up, I said. And then we're going to order the greasiest pizza in Chicago. Sophia managed a weak, watery laugh. God, yes. No more organic kale, please. Deal, I said. I helped her into the bathroom, turning on the water, finding clean towels. I acted the part of the big sister I had never been, and in caring for her, the last of my own fear evaporated. I wasn't the damsel. I wasn't the victim. I was the one who knew the wallpaper. I was the one who saw what the soldiers missed. Nicholas Rinaldi might be the king of Chicago, but he needed a queen who noticed the details. And as I listened to the water running and the city breathing below us, I knew I was ready for the crown. The silk blindfold tied around my eyes wasn't tight, but it was effective. It reduced my world to a series of sensations. The hum of the car engine beneath me, the scent of expensive leather, and the warm, heavy weight of Nicholas's hand resting on my knee. We have been driving for 20 minutes, I said, trying to gauge our location by the turns the car had taken. If you're taking me to the airport to deport me for being a terrible cook, just tell me. Nicholas laughed. A low, resonant sound that vibrated through the quiet cabin of the SUV. It was a sound I had heard more in the last 3 weeks than I probably had in my entire life before him. The tension that used to coil around him like razor wire had loosened. He was still dangerous. I knew that better than anyone. But the constant grinding pressure of the war was gone. You're not a terrible cook, he corrected. Your risotto is excellent. Your coffee, however, is a crime against Italy. I use a French press, I defended. It's sophisticated. It's sludge, he countered, his thumb tracing circles on my denim-clad knee. Relax, Emily. We're almost there. Where is there? If I told you, I wouldn't need the blindfold. I leaned back against the seat, surrendering to the mystery. 3 weeks. It had been exactly 21 days since the siege at the Hotel Blackwell. 21 days since the police found Kenta Yamaguchi's body and ruled it a gang-related altercation before promptly closing the file. 21 days since Nicholas had wiped the Green Dragon holdings off the map of Chicago's economy. The city felt different now. The heavy, oppressive winter was finally breaking. The snow piles were melting into slush, revealing the gray pavement underneath, and the air coming through the car vents smelled like rain and wet earth. It smelled like spring. The car slowed down, turning onto a street that sounded busier. I heard the distant rattle of the L train and the honking of taxis. Then, the car turned again, crossing what sounded like a cobblestone or brick driveway, and came to a smooth halt. We're here, Nicholas announced. I reached for the blindfold, but his hand caught my wrist gently. Not yet, he said. Wait until we're inside. I heard his door open, then the crunch of his boots on the pavement. A moment later, my door was pulled open, and the cool, damp air of the city rushed in. Nicholas took my hand, guiding me out. I stumbled slightly on the curb, but his arm was instantly around my waist, steadying me. I've got you, he murmured. Step up. I stepped up onto a sidewalk. The sounds of the city were louder here, echoing off tall buildings. Nicholas guided me forward. I heard the jingle of keys, the heavy click of a deadbolt turning, and then the chime of a bell. A bright, cheerful sound that triggered a deep, instinctual memory in my chest. We walked inside. The air changed instantly. It was still, cool, and smelled clean. It smelled of fresh paint, sawdust, and something else. Something faint and sweet. Okay, Nicholas said, standing behind me, his hands resting on my shoulders. Open your eyes. I reached up and untied the silk knot. The fabric fell away, and I blinked, adjusting to the light. I wasn't in the penthouse. I wasn't in my old cramped shop on 4th Street. I was standing in the center of a cathedral of light. It was a commercial space, cavernous and airy, with high tin ceilings painted a crisp, matte white. The floor was polished concrete, industrial, but warm. To my left, an entire wall was exposed brick, cleaned and sealed, giving the space a historic, textured feel. To my right, A wall of floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the room with natural light, overlooking a bustling street in the River North district. But it was the fixtures that made my breath catch. Custom-built shelving units made of reclaimed wood and black iron pipe lined the walls. A massive white marble island, twice the size of the one Nicholas had smashed, sat in the center of the room, gleaming under modern pendant lights. Behind it was a walk-in floral cooler with glass doors that spanned 20 feet. The kind of professional setup I had only ever seen in magazines. It was empty of flowers mostly, but the potential of the space was overwhelming. It screamed success. It screamed permanence. "Nicholas," I whispered, spinning around to face him. "What is this?" He was leaning against the closed door, hands in his pockets, watching me with a look of intense satisfaction. "This," he said, "is prime real estate. Former art gallery. I bought the building last week." "You bought the building?" I repeated, my brain struggling to process the scale of it. "For what? A front?" "No fronts," he said, pushing off the door and walking toward me. "No laundering. No hidden compartments. Just a business. Specifically, your business." He gestured to the vast empty space. "Your old shop was compromised. The lease was toxic, the location was dangerous, and quite frankly, the plumbing was a disaster. You needed a fresh start. This is it." "Nicholas, I can't afford rent in River North," I said, my pragmatism fighting with my awe. "The square footage alone. My overhead would be astronomical. I'd have to sell orchids made of solid gold." "You don't have to pay rent," a new voice called out from the back of the shop. I turned. Emerging from a doorway that I assumed led to an office or storage area was Sophia. She looked healthy. The bruises on her face had faded to faint yellow shadows that were easily hidden with makeup. But today, she wasn't wearing any. She was wearing ripped jeans, a paint-splattered t-shirt, and had her curly hair tied up in a messy bun. She was holding a clipboard and looking entirely at home. "Sophia?" I asked. "What are you doing here?" "Supervising," she grinned, walking over to give me a quick hug. "Nick has terrible taste in lighting. He wanted to put in fluorescent strips. I told him if he did that, you'd kill him. Flowers need full-spectrum LEDs. So, I overruled him." She gestured to the warm, glowing lights above us. "You're welcome." I looked from Sophia to Nicholas. The fact that she was here, laughing, arguing about light fixtures, was a miracle in itself. The trauma of the Blackwell was there. I could see it in the way she stayed close to the wall, the way her eyes checked the front door when a car drove by. But she wasn't broken. She was rebuilding, just like we were. "Explain," I said to Nicholas, crossing my arms. "Sophia said I don't pay rent." "Why?" "Because you own the building," Nicholas said simply. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. Not car keys, not apartment keys. A heavy brass master key ring. He walked over and pressed them into my hand. "Ground floor is commercial," he explained, pointing around the room. "Emily's Botanicals, or whatever you want to call it. Second and third floors are renovated office lofts. I've already secured 5-year leases with a tech startup and an architectural firm. The rental income from the upstairs covers the property tax, the utilities, and the maintenance for the entire building, with a significant profit margin left over." He closed my fingers over the keys. "You don't have overhead, Emily. You have an asset. You can sell 1 daisy a month, and you'll still be in the black." I stared at the keys in my hand. They felt heavy, cold, and real. "You did this," I whispered. "While you were dismantling an empire, you were buying real estate for me." "I multitask," he shrugged, but his eyes were serious. "I told you I would burn your debts. This is the other half of that promise. You never have to worry about a supplier squeezing you again. You never have to worry about a landlord. This is yours. Nobody can take it from you. Not the bank, not the Yakuza, not even me." "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Nicholas, this is millions of dollars. Because you saved my family," he said, his voice dropping to that low, intimate register that made the rest of the world disappear. "Because you stood in a freezing server room and saved my life. Because you are the only person in the world who knows what I am and doesn't look at me with fear. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cut my cheek. And because I want to see what you can grow when you aren't afraid of the winter. I looked at him, this man who spoke in violence and grand gestures, and I realized that this wasn't charity. It was an offering. He wasn't trying to buy me. He was trying to build a fortress around me that was made of light and legal contracts instead of concrete and guns. I don't know what to say, I admitted. Say yes, Sophia piped up from the counter, where she was pretending to check inventory lists. And hire me. I need a part-time job that doesn't involve my brother's security team breathing down my neck. I'm good at arrangements. I have an eye for color. I laughed, wiping a sudden tear from my cheek. You're hired, but you're starting on bucket duty. Everyone starts on buckets. Deal, Sophia beamed. Come, Nicholas said, taking my hand again. There's one more thing. He led me toward the back of the shop, past the cooler, to a heavy oak door. He unlocked it with his own key. This is the private office, he said. Soundproofed, reinforced door, separate secure server for your files. We walked inside. It was a beautiful room, lined with bookshelves and smelling of leather. A large mahogany desk sat in the center, a replacement for the table he had smashed. But this one was grander, more permanent. But it wasn't the furniture that caught my eye. On the wall behind the desk, framed in a simple, elegant shadow box, was a flower. It was the white chrysanthemum. The petals were dried now, brittle and preserved forever in resin. The red tips, the paint that had terrified me so much 3 weeks ago, were still vibrant, a stark contrast to the faded white. It didn't look like a thread anymore. It looked like a piece of art, a relic of a war that was won. I walked over to it, staring at the thing that had started it all. You kept it, I said softly. I told you, Nicholas said, standing beside me. It signifies a funeral, but not yours. He traced the edge of the frame. I kept it to remind myself. Every time I look at this, I remember the moment I almost lost you, and I remember that we won. It's a trophy, Emily. It's proof that we survived the fire. I looked from the flower to him. He looked relaxed here, in this space he had built for me. The shadows that usually clung to him were gone, chased away by the sunlight streaming in from the shop. You know, I said, leaning against the desk. In the language of flowers, a white chrysanthemum doesn't just mean death. In some cultures it means truth and loyalty. Is that so? He asked, stepping into my space, his hands finding my waist. Yes, I said, looping my arms around his neck. And red means passion. I think we covered all the bases. We missed one, he murmured, his eyes dropping to my lips. Which one? The future, he said. I don't know what flower represents that. I think, I said, looking over his shoulder at the sunlit shop, at Sophia humming to herself as she unpacked a box of vases, and at the wide-open world outside the window. I think it's whatever we decide to plant. Nicholas smiled, a real, unguarded smile that reached his eyes and stayed there. Then we better get started. I have a lot of dirt to dig. You're not digging anything in those jeans, I teased. Try me, he challenged. I'm very good with my hands. I know, I whispered, the memory of the nights in the penthouse flooding back. He kissed me then, right there in the office of my new life. It wasn't a desperate kiss, or a fearful one. It was steady. It tasted of coffee and promise. It tasted like home. We broke apart when Sophia called out from the front room. Hey, the delivery truck is here. Someone ordered 500 stems of hydra something? Sophia's voice carried from the front room, brighter than it had any right to be after everything that had happened at the Blackwell. She still startled at sirens and slammed doors, still slept with a lamp on more nights than she admitted. But she was here, alive and arguing with wholesalers and mispronouncing hydrangeas, and that felt like its own kind of miracle. Hydrangeas, I corrected, pulling away from Nicholas, though I kept his hand in mine. Blue ones, for the opening. Blue? Nicholas raised an eyebrow. I thought you hated blue. I hated blue when I was hiding, I said, squeezing his hand. Blue is calm. Blue is peace. I think I'm ready for a little peace. You have it, he promised. As long as I'm standing, you have peace. And you? I asked, looking at him one last time before going out to meet the delivery. What do you have, Nicholas? You gave me a building, a business, a future. What do you get out of this deal? Nicholas looked at the framed chrysanthemum, then at his sister laughing in the other room, and finally back at me. I get the florist, he said simply. And that was the only answer that mattered. I smiled, let go of his hand, and walked out into the light of the shop. Come on, boss. Those hydrangeas aren't going to trim themselves. Nicholas Rinaldi, the king of Chicago, the man who burned down warehouses and toppled empires, rolled up his sleeves and followed me. Yes, ma'am, he said. We had a garden to grow,